Hello. Oh, there we go, Michael. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. How are we?
I am doing well. It's good to have you back. We missed you last week.
It was good to be away, and it is good to be back. And I got my haircut and everything,
You
so
got your
I'm
haircut, but
ready for the weekend.
But Michael, why are you not as excited about today as I am?
Because I live in a different city, and I went to a college that is not UK.
So most people don't understand. There's two big things about University of Kentucky this week. First is University of Kentucky is still undefeated in football, which is like never happens, right, Michael? And we're playing Georgia this week, which is scary, the only other undefeated team. But what I'm most excited about is tonight, Big Blue Madness happens. I am heading to Lexington in a few hours because basketball season officially kicks off. So you might see some pom-poms today, Michael. Just telling you.
There you go.
They came out last week. So it is so good to be back on Experience Friday Live. I am Shawn Nason, my co-host Michael Harper here with us. We're really excited to have a past guest back with us today to dig in a little bit farther. Hannah Grady Williams is going to be here. But before we jump in to Hannah, Michael, why don't you tell our listeners and everyone about why we started Experience Friday Live, why experience matters to everyone.
I think this may be one of my favorite parts of getting to do this each week is to be able to restate what it is we're doing and why it matters. And this week for me, I've just been thinking about people, and we often say humans to be even more clear, right? That humans make up business, and when we lose sight of the human in the business, then before long the business is going to suffer. And there's all kinds of evidence for that. We're not going to have time to get into that today. But let's just understand, everybody agree that when we don't take care of people in our businesses, our missions will never happen. And so that's why we talk about this ecosystem, the experience ecosystem, which is the collection of all the people and the touch points and the systems that come together to define those experiences that everyone has within an organization, is affected by in some way. And it has been hard. We've challenged ourselves not to go easily about this. We don't just talk about customer experience because that's the end result. We talk about all the experiences that happen to create a business model and how important all that is. And, y'all lives are at stake in a lot of businesses. And even if you just look at it, you're employing people, you're affecting their lives. So that's why I'm especially excited to have Hannah back with us today, since she's focusing on Gen Z. And that is such a critical thing for people to be focusing on. We talk about worker shortage. So let's quit talking. Let's do something about it. And that means we have to change. And I'm also excited to see Hannah again because pretty soon she's going to be too famous for us off. We're going to have to work through her private booking secretary or something. So I'm excited to be able to still talk to her.
I am too. And so let's not belabor this anymore because
let's go.
If you guys had heard Hannah before, Hannah Williams' story, she talks about began in a blue pickup truck when her father handed her at 12 years old the phone and asked her to close a deal on an investment property. And after that unexpected introduction to the world of entrepreneurship, she found herself thrust into a climate of innovation, challenge, and opportunity. And she enrolled in college at the age of 14. In case people don't hear that, 14. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I cannot even imagine her coming to college in one more year. And graduated with a degree in international business at age 18. Now, as a 23-year-old Gen Zer, she has consulted businesses from startups to the Fortune 500 companies and is on a mission to help leaders leverage Gen Z talent as a competitive advantage and build radical empathy in the workplace. And most importantly, the last time we had her on, she did not have her book out, but she's the new author of the new book, A Leader's Guide to Unlocking Gen Z, Insider Strategies to Empower Your Team. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having
Yay.
me.
And you sound great, Hannah. You know, this is a live show. Hannah was having some technology issues beforehand. Don't we love technology?
You'd
It
think
was
as a Gen Zer I'd have all these things figured out by now, but my computer decided to die on me this
and Michael and I have been in those situations, so no worries about that at all, Hannah. It is so great to have you back. And you know, Hannah, I am going out on a limb here by stating something because Michael and I had this great conversation today. This is not the last time we want to have you back because your book actually is broke up into 4 sections: attracting, recruiting, retaining, and engaging Gen Z. So last time we talked a lot about attracting. So today we want to jump in and talk about recruiting, which means, Hannah, we have to have you back 2 more times to get around retaining and engaging, right? And I've had so many people reach out to me and say, "Oh my gosh, we're so excited to have Hannah back." The last time, all this knowledge she gave us. So when we were together, as we said, we talked about attracting Gen Zers. And this week we want to move into recruiting. So in your work, Hannah, what's the difference between attracting and recruiting?
Yeah, let's dive in. So when I think about attracting versus recruiting, what we're talking about with attracting is really understanding what does a business need to be doing from the get-go in terms of their brand, their social presence, their activism in order to get a Gen Z or even interested. You know, what do you have to do as a company for a native digital to say, you know, that's a company I really want to work for? And that game has changed immensely in the past few years with especially, I mean, the impact that TikTok is having on the ability for companies to really position themselves. And when I say companies, it's not just companies anymore, it's individual leaders within companies to be able to position themselves as someone Gen Z wants to work for. So that's really the attracting side. And in my book, I really lay out a lot of things within this idea of attracting because a lot of what a company does on the attracting side influences how forward thinking they are in terms of their leadership and how they retain staff as well. So, in terms of how you guys talk about the whole experience of the human experience, a lot about how a company attracts employees says something to a Gen Zer about how it treats staff once they're part of an organization. So, that's more the attracting side. And then recruiting, at least in the book, I get a little bit more tangible with, you know, what does that onboarding process have to look like? What do the actual job descriptions need to look like? So that's where I would draw that line.
Love it. Michael, thoughts?
I just think it's a really bold move because you could say that attraction and recruiting are the same thing. So to even just separate the two, I really enjoyed the specific things in the book around the recruiting, and that's what we want to get into, of course, today. So our Stoke is a quote from you, which is talking about a term that I loved and spent some time with, and it's in today's competitive market. Are you missing out on culture-centric recruitment opportunities to take advantage of word-of-mouth recruiting and FOMO, which is, of course, is fear of missing out, which is a very much a generation, well, late millennial and Generation Z thing. It's probably a native thing for the Gen Zers, right? So talk to us about this culture-centric recruiting. Like, what the heck is that, and why is it so important?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics to discuss because I personally have been impacted by a company that did culture-centric recruiting really well. So culture-centric recruiting is basically the idea that companies have to think about the experience that an employee, or get this, an employee's children or the people they're touching around them have with the brand of a company. So when we talk about culture-centric recruiting, it kind of, most leaders I talk to about this, or it kind of spins your head a little bit because you don't think about recruiting in terms of culture. Most companies think about recruiting as a separate thing from the rest of their experience, right? I'm sure you guys hear this all the time.
Oh yeah.
You've got the recruitment team that's kind of functioning like a sales team, and they're making lots of calls, and they're putting up lots of job advertisements, and they're hoping and praying that the right candidate will walk in the door. And then that HR segment is very separated in most companies from the leadership side, where you've got leaders who are either mentoring or not mentoring their staff, or they're not training their staff the way they should. So you have this huge gap in most companies. What Gen Z is saying as we look at the modern day workplace is we're beginning to see and break down a lot of the BS that happens in organizations, what we see from the outside, between that disconnect of the recruitment side and the culture. So a company may do a really great job being consistent with their reach outs to employees, making sure they're visible on Indeed and ZipRecruiter and all of the places where they're hiring. Or they may have signs out on the side of the road, as we're seeing everywhere now.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And I'm in a hospitality-centric area in Asheville, so they're literally littering the side of the roads. So you have the companies who are doing a really great job being visible in terms of saying, we have jobs available and here's our job boards. But then there's this massive disconnect when you talk to the actual employees of the company and you see how overworked they are, how underpaid they are, how their managers don't care about them, or how their managers are so overworked themselves they don't have a second to put into the experience. And then the leaders haven't taken time to dig their well before they needed water. You see, we've got, of course, a massive hiring challenge right now all across the country. Well, not just our country, but the world.
Well, yeah.
Have a massive global talent shortage. And I keep thinking every time I see these signs, these companies have not invested for years into an actual culture that will create an environment that employees want to work in. Now, of course, this is only one part of a bigger challenge, but to come back to this idea of culture-centric recruiting, what Gen Z is seeing, and we're a generation, if you look at us as a whole, as a native digital generation, where we see straight through an employer's attempts to portray themselves as something that they're not. So when we see the employer's, job advertisement out that says, we're like a family, or come join our team, and then you talk to an actual employee, or you see their honest review on social media, you go, yeah, that's BS, because I know what the actual employees are thinking.
Well, Hannah, you've got me totally wanting to bring out the pom-poms again, right? Like you are speaking our language. And I even love Michael, one of our listeners who's a dear friend of ours, Kat, says we are in the people business, right? And that's what you're saying, but it's not, to me, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Michael, it's more than just saying it. It's living it. And just this week, right, Michael, you and I are working with two organizations. I've spent a ton of time with one of them on the phone this week that's going through a massive disruption culturally in their employee space, and another one that's just, that's gone through it too. And that's what we're navigating. And everything you're saying is just like fires me up, Michael.
Well, yeah, and just to put some numbers behind it, I know I've seen at least 2 or 3 studies that employees would rather take a little bit of a pay decrease to be able to work in a happier place, a place with a better culture. That does not justify driving wages down. I'm not saying that. But I do think it's interesting that most people say that it's okay to, get paid 10 cents less an hour to go work at a place with a better culture. I think that speaks volumes. So just to be thinking about what it means to be culture centric and not just like you say, like when you have an established business and how do you retain, but how is that a recruiting tactic? That's something that you have to pay attention to. And I think that comes through clearly in your book.
Yes.
And I know that you've got some some clear strategies for it. So can you share 2 or 3 specific strategies that are your favorite for being able to do this?
Absolutely. And this is where it actually comes back to a story, which I won't share the whole thing because it is a lengthy one, and I share it in the book about my own experience.
Go get the book.
Okay.
That's right. Go get the book, people.
Read it. There's a long story in there about my first job, which I was recruited into the company Biltmore because of this incredible multi-generational cultural recruitment centric process where the family of this company, the family business, not only invest in their staff, but they invest in the next generation of connecting with their children, the children of their employees early as a recruitment tool. And so when we talk about specific strategies, one of the key things that I talk about with leaders is, again, this concept of digging your well before you need water. So when you're thinking about recruiting as a company in today's world, you have to recognize that your employees, especially native digital employees, are being bombarded with messaging from employers earlier and earlier and earlier. We're no longer making career choices in our, junior or senior year of college. Most of us, actually 63% of Gen Z is open to other types of routes besides going to college. So if 63% of my generation may enter a trade-based skill program, you've got to be getting in front of us in high school, even middle school. So one huge, important tactic that I would give any organization, no matter the size, this works for small businesses all the way up to major corporations, is thinking about how do I invest in my primary talent market of employees as early as possible. Maybe that means partnering with a middle school in your area. If you've got a STEM school, a math school, an arts school, partnering with one of those types of programs and not just sponsoring the baseball game, I think that's the easy way out.
Again, right?
And no longer effective.
Well,
right?
and that what you're saying is a whole nother systemic show we could talk about, the three of us. We have to change our educational systems. I live in a very suburbia area in Ohio, and our school system is completely geared to send, and they're proud that 99% of their graduates go to college.
And how many of them make it through college?
How many make it through college, and how many of them are happy in the places they are? This is a great question, and I want this one to be answered by you, Hannah. And I'm learning new tools about this whole thing. So look at this.
Hey, David.
You can find negative reviews from an employee perspective for any company. How do you combat that? What's your advice around that, Hannah?
Yeah, this is a great question, David. So 2 thoughts on this. Number one, if you ask, and we're talking about Gen Z specifically here, and then we'll talk a little bit broader. So if you ask a Gen Zer, did you look at reviews of our company before you were hired here? What do you think? What do you think most Gen Zers would say?
No. I would say from my Gen X understanding millennials that they would spend a lot of time doing it. So it's probably the opposite.
Yeah. Yes. I like that answer, Michael. You probably learned that from last time where it's shifting of expectations, right?
Yes. So that's a foundational. We got to stop and say, this is how I would think. Now let me flip it.
So I just worked with a client, a major healthcare company on the East Coast. And one of the processes of this whole engagement was to interview a large subset of their native digital staff. And out of this entire process, less than 40% of those native digitals actually even looked at a review on Glassdoor before they applied, before they got the job.
Wow.
So you think most companies you would think most people my age would be looking at reviews like we do on Amazon, right? Glassdoor, etc. But here's what's happened in the past few years. places like Glassdoor or any other review site, we look at the reviews, and I do this with every company I work with. I look at the Glassdoor reviews and I go, oh my gosh, so many of these seem so fake, or they're not relevant to my position. And so because of that association of companies like Glassdoor with our parents' generation, with that type of almost bureaucratic, not really, there's not any whistleblowing happening on there. You can tell companies are giving their employees incentives or asking their employees to review the company. And so what I'm finding, at least with the companies I'm working with, is, and this is actually a little bit counter to what I was thinking as a Gen Zer myself, most of their staff, they're not looking at those reviews as in depth as you would think. So I would say, and I say this in my book, definitely focus on your reviews on Glassdoor and other sources, but don't stress about them. Because if you're trying to hire native digitals, then you need to have at least, don't make sure you don't have, 1.5 stars on Glassdoor, put some effort into that, but make sure that the reviews that are coming out of this are authentic and don't seem crafted, because we can see, again, straight through the BS. I talk about that in my book as the trinity of things Gen Z is looking for. And one of those pillars is authenticity. And we can see straight through when you as an employer ask someone to review things. So David, to answer your question directly with this broader perspective in mind, if you've got negative reviews on your site, honestly, that may be a positive thing for you, because then if you're not perfectly polished and you don't have, 5 everybody, we're likely to take you more seriously. So I don't know what reviews you were seeing specifically, David, but of course, if you have too many negative reviews, that's going to be we're not even going to try to apply for your company. But if you have a couple and they're honest and they're, negative reviews, or we can see that an employer who may have been disgruntled or whatnot left them, that actually makes you seem more authentic.
Love it. Got one more question.
Focus on positives, right?
Yeah. Got one more question from some listeners. This comes from Paul out of Texas. What about employers that will not even advertise a salary range?
Oh my gosh.
Because he shares a bit of a story. His daughter is in a very lengthy program in vet school, and 8 months out they have to accept a position, and this one company would not do that. And when they finally got her letter, it was $60,000 less than her highest offer. So how does that happen is what he's saying, and is what a waste of time. So what's your perspective on that, Hannah?
Totally agree with you, Paul. This is one of the major red flags for Gen Z. Now, of course, we're in a little bit of a tumultuous hiring market right now, where a lot of people who've been displaced in their jobs are putting out, dozens or hundreds of applications and just seeing what sticks. But when we kind of begin to settle down here and things, I won't say return to a semblance of normal, because this is the new normal. Yep. However, I will say that of course, we're going to see some, ebbs and flows. We're in a really, really strong hiring crisis. We are going to see that taper down. I feel very confident. So to answer your question, when we get back to a place where employers are not only, where they're, I guess, not having the same crisis they're having right now, this is going to be a huge red flag for Gen Z. If I see a job posting, or any of my friends, and in fact, one of my friends, I was helping her apply for some jobs recently, and the biggest red flag on any job description that we could find, that we chose, we literally read the description, saw it didn't list a pay range, and immediately clicked on something else, because we're again not going to put up with the BS. If you're not going to be straightforward and upfront with us about what you're paying and showing us the value you believe that position holds, we're not applying for it.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, we had one more question around trends, but I think you just gave us a nugget that we need to hear. So Hannah, as I said, we want to have you back 2 more times. We'd love to have you back once in November and once in December to close the gap on this book, because the wealth of knowledge that you are dropping and the nuggets that you're dropping, I know Michael and I are just excited, and obviously, listeners are asking questions, and you really are doing amazing things. I want to get one more question, because it just came in, and this is from another dear friend of ours. Can you address AI platforms that potentially weed out candidates for jobs with great experience, but whose resumes somehow don't include keywords that the AI program is searching for?
Great question, David. You're going to hate my answer. I haven't used enough of these programs to give I guess, an honest recommendation. I can say that there's a lot of platforms that I've seen with companies that I've worked with who are, I guess I would say, trying to do way too much on the AI side and not enough of this human experience touch. And they're weeding out candidates who could be some of their best hires. So
There's the pom-poms again.
yeah. I mean, if you're looking for an AI software, I'd say, get something for sure that is going to help you sort through a huge influx of resumes. But from what I've seen, they all have some flaw, and you can never get past that human touch. In fact, some of the best companies that I've worked with have hired, because of my recommendation, a physical pair of eyes, a human, to screen every single application that comes in. And they're hiring people because they want their employee experience, that candidate experience, to set them apart from all the other companies who are neglecting to put a pair of eyes on every application. So that would be my recommendation to you, if that's even an option, David, is to find some software that works for you or does part of the process, but don't neglect the human touch, because that's where you have the opportunity to differentiate yourself from every other company.
Well, and I'm going to say this right up front, and this is this year, just sitting around, I started looking at jobs, like what could I do, and I love LinkedIn. They do the easy apply, right? Jobs that could not have been that LinkedIn recommended to me, like, you're in the top 5% of potential candidates, right?
Oh yeah.
And I had all the skills, 0 calls. And I've probably applied for over 50 jobs testing some of this theory, David. Like, it is just, other words, it's bullshit to me.
Yeah.
And I will leave it with that. So, Hannah, how do people get a hold of you? Again, we'll get you back on here in November and December, but how do you get your book, and how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, don't miss going to follow me on LinkedIn if you just click on my profile, because I post 3 times a week content that will help you connect with native digitals. I just rebranded myself, Shawn. So I got one of my good friends who's Christopher Lockhead. He's the king of category design. And he told me my title should be the Gen Z CEO advisor. And that's typically who I advise, is business owners who are saying, how do we connect with native digitals and make sure our companies are still relevant in 15 years? So that is what I post on LinkedIn, is companies to help business leaders, to help CEOs connect with the native digital generation. And in my book, so you can find it on Amazon, you can go to my website at hannahgwilliams.com. In my book, and I hope those of you who are asking some of these great technical questions will pick up a copy, because there's a section that I actually go through things like, what job description is actually going to resonate with Gen Z? And I call out specific types of sentences and phrases and actions that you can take to make sure that your job descriptions are appealing to Gen Z. And that's just one example. So there's a lot. It's almost like I tried to write it as like a Bible for a CEO. You can flip to any chapter, look at examples, look at graphs, and take just one insight from it that you can apply to your strategy to help your business remain relevant to the next generation. So hit me up if that can help.
Awesome.
For instance, one of my big takeaways was non-traditional resumes. I have zero experience with that, and I can see that completely becoming a different thing in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Yay. Yes. Yeah. Resumes.
Next time, Hannah, I'll show you my non-traditional resume. It makes Michael cringe. It's a 1-pager that's bright in colors and everything. So, well, awesome. Hannah, hang out here for us. Let Michael and I finish up, and we'll come back with you. So thanks again, Hannah, and we'll talk to you right after this. And Michael, just to let people know as you hear the dog barking, because it's now starting to storm here, you can get a hold of us at mofi.co or at ShawnNason.com. And you can send us an email at hello@mofi.co. We did not talk about this, but I want to make sure we talk about this too. Connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you play in the experience ecosystem, we want you. Reach out to us. We want to hear your story on the show. A couple things, because I didn't do it at the beginning because we wanted to dive in. Next week's episode, Deb Nupp, Managing Director of Growth Play, which is actually a friend of Hannah's that we got introduced to, will be with us next week, sharing with us. And Combustion Chronicles next week, episode getting real about customer centricity. So we're really excited to have Annette Franz with us. She's an amazing lady, an amazing friend of ours. So, Michael, thanks for today.
Yep.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to everybody else. And we'll see you next week.